Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today's daily chess test is hard, but I think it's going to be instructive and it's going to be about decision making. Okay, the first position you can see on the screen, it's black to move. It's from one of my training games. And here my opponent played knight g4, so I had a decision to make. Pause the video. Well, try your best to understand everything. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but delve deep into the position. Okay, pause the video, solve it, see you in a minute. Good luck, bye-bye. Okay, so here the obvious question is what happens if you take the bishop. So either you take the bishop or you don't. If you don't take the bishop, then you don't want your pawns to be doubled. So that much is simple. So what do you have here? Firstly, you're up a pawn, which is a great thing. Also, you have the bishop pair. Now, it's a bit awkward developing the bishop on c8, and it's going to take some time. Ideally, you would either like to play bishop d7, bishop c6, which seems perfect, or maybe alternatively play rook b1, rook b8, b6, bishop b7, which could also work. Or even play b6 because queen a8 fails to bishop b7. For now it doesn't because a7 is hanging, but maybe you can prepare it. But in any case, if you could do that, then you are definitely better, regardless of whether you win a piece or not. Okay, but if you can win a piece, have to calculate it. If it's good, it's good. If it's not good, then don't take the piece. So let's have a look at that. I actually took the piece in the game. So if you take the bishop, there is no other moves, but knight takes f6. That's the point. And pawn takes f6. Now, what wasn't clear to me during the game was whether this piece sacrifice was playing for a draw or for a win. I thought it played for a win, and I'd refuted the win, and then I thought, great, I'm winning. I'm going to take the bishop on c4. Okay, so, but it actually should be played for a draw, which arguably is correct because black is a pawn up and has the bishop pair. So in this position, I missed a drawing chance. So the three moves you have to calculate absolutely is queen to g4 check, queen takes f6, and rook to e4. Rook to e4 was played in the game, which actually loses, which I saw. And since I managed to refute that, I went in for, I took the piece. However, both queen f6 and queen g4 check actually draw. And it's funny that they draw. I didn't see the last idea, which is the reason why they draw. If queen takes f6, then I thought, well, great, queen takes c2, and that's amazing. If I get my queen to g6, then I simply win. He has rook e5, which I saw, so now queen g6 runs into rook g5, but I have rook e8. And how does white continue the attack? He doesn't have time to double on the h file. Checks along the g file bring him nowhere. For example, rook g5, king f8. And how do you continue the attack? If you check me here, I just run away. If you check me here, if you check me here, I just run away. But here's the problem. All of that is true. But once he checks you on h6 and you go to e7, then queen h4 is a killer move. And that I didn't see. And this is the reason why the piece sacrifice is sound, actually, and gives black a draw. Now, if you don't want to get mated, you have to repeat. King f8 is the only move. Because if you get to the d file, for example, I don't know, king here, then queen takes. And that's it. Now white is much better, and white is probably going to be winning this position. So that's why queen f6 is actually a draw. Queen g4 works just the same, because king h8, for example, and now queen to h4, and he's going to take the pawn. I mean, if you don't do anything, takes the pawn and checks you. So, for example, f5 runs into a draw, queen f6, queen g5. If you play queen takes c2, then queen f6, king g8. And now queen g5, of course, is not possible because of queen to g6. But again, rook e5, we have the same position. And now rook e8, we saw this before. Rook g5, king f8, and queen h6, king e7, queen h4. And again, you have to go in for the same variation. So that's unfortunate. That after this, both queen takes and queen g4 actually lead to a draw, which I failed to see. My opponent played rook e4, which plays for the win. Now this doesn't work, and this I saw correctly. Here you have only two moves. You can play f5 or e5. Nothing else really makes any sense. F5 is a blunder, but it's hard to see why. E5 is just correct. I played e5 in the game. This prevents rook g4 check, and it actually prevents doubling up on the h file with rook h4, queen h3, and it's just game over. If rook h4, for example, then queen takes c2, queen takes f6, and queen f5, and white resigns. And if queen f6, after that, then queen e6. That was the whole point. So if e5, queen takes f6, then queen e6, and again, there's nothing he can do. The best is probably to take the pawn. You just take and play bishop e6. If you play f5 though, after rook e4, then it's a bit harder. Not because of rook h4. The rook h4 doesn't really work because you can play f6, and on queen h5 you play rook f7 and everything is fine. But because of this tricky move queen to g3, and you have only one move, you have to play king h8, and now queen to d6. And this is actually tough to see. I did manage to see this in the game, and I thought this actually loses for black, but it's a draw. You can just repeat with king g8, and he has nothing better. But yeah, this was tough to see. So after king g8, he can just go queen g3. So queen g3, king h8, queen d6. If you decide to lose the game, you can with something like rook g8, then queen e5 check, and you actually resign this position. White is winning. So coming back to the starting position, all of that is pretty hard to see, especially in a training game online. And it's understandable that someone misses something, but I was actually pretty sure that taking the bishop wins, which was a mistake because I didn't see queen h4. But if I had a little grain of doubt, I would have simply played bishop e7 or bishop d8 or bishop g5. And practical decisions like this have to be made during games, and the reason why I didn't go for example, bishop to g5 or bishop to e7 is because I saw that white gets a ton of activity. That's the only alternative. If you don't take the bishop, we have to move the bishop from f6. So for example, if you play bishop to e7, which seems sensible, then bishop d3 saves his bishop, pressure on h7. You try to develop to c6, fine, bishop to d7. Queen h3, have to play g6. Now knight h6, knight f6, queen h6. And my head started hurting. I saw this position and I thought, okay, I'm just going to take the bishop. This, of course, black is still better, has the bishop pair, has an extra pawn, but this seems like too much activity, and I don't think this knight is any worse than my bishop. I think it's actually better. And who knows what's coming? Maybe rook e4, rook f4 or something. Also with bishop g5, it's the same thing. Bishop d3, bishop d7. I don't know. This is probably enough to win, but yeah. So yeah, I made the wrong decision. The correct decision was to retreat the bishop. Hopefully you got that. Okay, let's move on to the second position. Now this is, well, this you are going to enjoy. If you like chess, you're going to love this position. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much. Pause the video, give it your best. But don't beat yourself up if you don't see everything. This is quite hard. It's important to see the winning idea, and only then you may be able to see the nuances which could mess it up or accomplish it. Okay, pause the video, good luck. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, white is a square away from queening. However, this pawn is going to be captured by black. There isn't really a way to save it because this pawn is too much counterplay. Your king obviously cannot challenge it easily because you cannot go here, you cannot go here, cannot go here. So as soon as black plays h4, he's going to be threatening h3, h2, h1 equals queen, at which point you will have to take that pawn and black is going to take here. So what we know is that if white is trying to win, he's going to have to win with his b5 pawn. So that's the first deduction you had to make, that these two pawns will get off the board. Okay then, So where's your advantage? Why would you be playing for the win instead of black? Well, your king is much better. And no doubt about it, black's king is in the corner, stuck on g2. What's even more important is that your king is shouldering it out. The black king has no good squares. It can go to f2, which doesn't really accomplish much. It could go to h3, which doesn't really accomplish much. So your king is much better than black's. So how do we try to win? Well, let's assume that we have taken on h5, black has taken on b7. The way to win this position is not to keep your rook on the 5th rank defending your b5 pawn. That would lead you nowhere. It's to get your rook behind your b5 pawn. Once you get your rook behind your b5 pawn, let's imagine that the rook is here, defending the pawn. Let's imagine that the black king is here. Let's imagine that the white king is here. So the first thing we can notice here is that the white king is controlling black's pawn on f6, so this pawn is going nowhere. The second thing we can notice is that our king is much closer to the promotion square of our own pawn. So in order to prevent this pawn from queening, black would have to blockade it on b6. So let's say black plays rook b6, and then all we have to do is play king to d5, king to c5, and chase the rook away, queen our pawn. So that's the way to win. Now, once you have your winning plan, your winning idea, now comes the time to calculate. We are going to be calculating only 2 serious candidate moves. The rest, I mean, maybe, okay, we should consider king e4 or king e3. If king e3, for example, then h4, and the idea is rook to g7, which now, if the king goes to the h file, you have no problems. You can actually save your pawn and just queen everything. So king f1, king f3, h3, you have to play rook h7 now, and now king e1. And actually, this is a draw. h2, for example, okay, king e4, let's say h2, rook h2, rook takes b7, rook to b2, and now we have something similar to what we wanted, but we are not quick enough. Okay, let's just have a look at this, excuse me. Okay, king e1, okay, yeah, let's say we play king e3, which seems better, cutting off the black king. That might give us better chances. If we do play king e3, then black simply plays king back to f1, and we have to play king f3 back, and king e1, and the repetition. If we play king e4, black can actually go h2. And now if we play king to d5, then rook takes b7 is okay. Okay, and if we play rook takes h2, then rook takes b7, and if we play rook to b2, I think black is quick enough with king d1. I'm going to have to check it. Okay, yeah, okay, black is quick enough with king d1. Excuse me, this is a very complicated endgame. Okay, king d1. Yeah, okay, and we don't have time for king d5 because black has counterplay with his own pawn. Okay, okay, sorry about that. But king e3 is a weird move, and it doesn't really make sense to allow all of those extra moves for black. So what we are going to be calculating is rook takes pawn, and king to f5, because those are the 2 quickest moves. Okay, so if you're trying to win, those 2 make most sense. Let's have a look at rook takes pawn first. If rook h5, then of course rook to b7. And now we know what we are trying to do. We want to go here, and here, and here, support our pawn, move our king into the position. Now, we start with rook c5, of course. Black plays king to f2. We play rook to c2. Okay, fine, king e1, and rook to b2. Okay, and now king to d1, trying to chase our rook away. We continue b6. We can also start moving our king. King to c1, rook to b5. Okay, so again, we want to do this. We are trying to chase the rook away and win. So black plays king to d2. We continue king to e4. And now black has a move that actually draws. And if black is in time to play king c3 and king c4 and get into the position before our king gets to d5, then black is fine. So if black plays king to c3 here, that's actually not okay, because we play king d5 and he cannot go to c4. This is an easy win. He, for example, plays king d3, we play king c6, and black resigns. So that's the winning method. However, after king e4, black has this amazing resource f5, and this is just enough of a distraction to give black excellent drawing chances. Of course, or a draw. If you take with the rook, I take your pawn, clear draw. If you take with the king, I now have time to come in with my king. So king e5, king c4, crucial tempo on the rook, and after the rook moves, I just go king c5, and that's it. You're going to lose your pawn, and an easy draw. So rook takes h5, even though it seems nice, doesn't really work. Even though we are trying to go for our plan, we are one move too slow, because once we get to e4, black has f5. Now, let's look at the correct way to play. Okay, then I know this is very hard. It took me a lot of time to try and understand everything, but I think it's very instructive. Okay, so the correct way to play is king to f5. The reason why this is the best move is because he is simply going to be out of... black is going to be one move too slow to do what he did in the previous variation. Let's have a look at king g3 first as a response, which doesn't work. I just take on h5 and rook takes b7, king takes f6. That's the point. This king is now cut off, so you cannot go king g3 and allow me to take on f6. So he has to play h4 again. Okay, fine. So rook takes h4. Again, this was forced. And rook to b2. Rook to b7. And now, of course, if you take on f6, he takes our pawn, so that doesn't work. So we get behind our pawn. And notice what we've done. We've managed to get our rook behind without too much hassle. And this king, if it tries to get into the position, is going to be easily cut off, and it's not going to be in time to reach its ideal squares that we saw before. So now what black has to do, because if black, for example, marches his king up the board, then he loses. You just push b6 and take the pawn. Or you can take the pawn straight away. It doesn't really matter, both win. So black plays rook b6, defending his pawn, blockading your pawn. And now the key idea. You play king to f4. Now what does this move do? It simply restricts the king. We know that if he tries to go to h3, then we just do this, and we win. If he goes to f2, we now have the opposition, the king is completely cut off, and we play rook b2 check. So king e1, okay, we continue, king e3. Again, cutting the king off, now we are threatening mate. If king f1, then of course we do this again. And if king to d1, there's this beautiful idea, which this is as far as I got when I was solving it, and then I failed. I just didn't see this. I thought, okay, I'm going to play king d3, he's going to play king c1, I'm going to play rook b4, maybe that works. But the easy winning idea is rook to d2 check. Now, whatever he does, doesn't matter. If he plays king c1 or king e1, you play rook d5. Okay, so this transfer of the rook to the back to the fifth rank is actually decisive, which is weird, which I'd failed to see. So let's say king e1, doesn't really matter. King e1, rook d5. I mean, what can he do? Let's say king f1, let's check him again, it's fine. King to g2, and now king to d4. And that's it, this is unstoppable. Let's say king to g3, king c5, rook e6, b6, king g4, just promote. Easily winning. So, this is such a hard endgame. It's actually an endgame study, but if you try and understand everything, I think you will get better at the endgame. If you understand everything, then that's even better. So let's look at the winning procedure once again. So we play king f5, okay, getting closer to this pawn, making sure that black cannot move his king across the board. So h4, takes, defending with rook b4. This was the key concept, that once black pushes his pawn to h4, we are not blocking in our rook with the king. And okay, we just go here. So h4, rook h4, rook b7, rook b4, rook b6, blocking, fine. King f4, cutting the black king off. And we're going to cut it as far away as possible until we reach the ideal position with both of our pieces. King f2, rook b2, king e1, king e3, king d1, rook d2. Let's go to c1 this time. Rook c1, king c1, rook d5. And now let's say king c2, he tries to move up the board, but it doesn't work. King d4. Eventually, I'm going to play king c5 and queen my pawn. I thought this was just a remarkable position. I mean, let me know how far you got. I didn't solve everything, but I tried, and I'd spent a ton of time trying to solve it. Okay, sorry about the one mistake and what I didn't know about the position. There's probably still a ton of things I don't know about this position, but I tried. Yeah, and thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.